falsified in the case of me issuing a promissory obligation to you for a $100,000 house, that costs the bank $2. So for $2, it collects $100,000. And then, as if the $100,000 was at risk the whole time, while the only property the bank had at risk was the $2, which of course is recouped in a tiny fraction of the first payment of against any such debt. The bank is charging interest, which multiplies the $100,000 debt. So let's just say $400,000 of interest would be paid over 30 years, for example. At the end of that 30 years, have you paid off the $100,000 debt? Well, yeah, but in order to do so, you've reassumed the $100,000 debt to maintain the circulation, and you've also assumed a further $400,000 debt because all the interest you had to pay was borrowed back into circulation too. So at the end of 30 years, in general, we're all in debt $500,000 on a debt that was 30 years ago $100,000. And that's how it works. You see, you can look at it in the very data of the government and the banking system as well. You can see all this. You can see this escalation of indebtedness, So these aren't difficult things to discern or they're not secrets either. My God, is it a secret that you don't get lawful consideration from a bank when it creates money? Jesus, every one of us knows for damn sure that's a fact. Because none of us ever get lawful consideration from the bank. It's merely publishing evidence of our very own promissory obligation. When it creates money, that money didn't even exist in the bank's possession before. You see? It has to be created. And unless we trace it from the creation of money, we understand nothing. Sure, they could loan the same $100,000 out, which they'd laundered into their possession. Sure. And if that money already existed, they could be loaning lawful consideration in that case if we didn't trace it back to its beginning, realizing that there was no lawful consideration ever given up in the first place to launder it into their possession. So in truth, it was never the rightful possession of the bank because of two things. They never gave up lawful consideration for it at its creation, plus the obligation was to retire principal from circulation. It's been paid. It no longer represents value, and it can't be laundered into the possession of the banking system because inherently it's to be retired or destroyed. You see? So there's no way for either the principal or the interest, no rightful way. There is no justifiable way for either the principal or the interest to ever get into the property of the banking system. Most of us, if we have a $2 cost to issue a representation of $100,000, that's our $2 cost. And what do we charge? Profit, on our cash outlays for something like that, especially when we don't do any of the work of producing the money. Maybe 50% profit. So the bank should get 50%, maybe, if money has to be issued in a physical manner. In all other cases where it's usually just records and which are always electronic, it costs virtually nothing to create money. So there's no justification whatsoever. And I mean, even in the case of physical money, some profit might be due for the cost of publishing representations of it, But under mathematically perfected economy, which is a further lawful obligation to economize all costs, you wouldn't, even deploy physical money unless you had to for some reason. And then you would impose those costs upon the people that require the issuance of the physical money, if you even intended to accommodate that. You understand, if you do all your commerce through this common monetary foundry, how much crime it would eliminate. Some of the most staunchest opposition would be drug dealers. Why? Because it'd be hard to conduct much business at all with it being impossible to conduct it through the common monetary foundry, you'd have to have an alternate currency somehow, and you would you would have little that option to do that very successfully if everybody else was dependent instead on the only actual veritable currency through the common monetary foundry, which is just going to exist as data. How would a politician take a bribe? They would, how would lobbyists bribe a politician? In other words, these are things that we need to eliminate. And so mathematically perfected economy accomplishes so much beyond just the facts that it resolves our monetary issues and allows us to restore our industry and to sustain ourselves even in retirement, at no cost to government or the rest of society. This is the only sustainable system that there is, because it's the only system in which the value of the currency is immutable from the moment it's created to the moment that it's retired.
All right. I had a question there now, and I can't remember. Did you ever get that one?
No, I'm getting close to that stage of life, though.
Oh God! I knew this was going to happen at some stage during the night.
Jane had a good question. What was that?
Last night.
Yeah, I forgot what her question was, but she did have a good question. Where's Jane when we need her?
She's away hiding somewhere. No doubt. Oh, there she is. There, she's just agreed. You said you were getting to that point in life. Yeah, me too. She says. Well.
Does she
Jane,
remember her question?
I was just going to ask her that. Jane, if you're out there, please remember your question. It was good, and it had us talking for a while.
She asked. She asked basically. I recall now. She asked basically, being as these problems are man-made, can't we solve them easily then? And basically, we went through this whole process of, explaining the obfuscation of the currency, this falsification of indebtedness and false imposition of interest, unjustifiable imposition of interest, which multiplied the falsified indebtedness into terminal indebtedness, and we explain how to solve it. So, yeah, that was a good question, because in truth, they're very simple questions, because once you understand what the banking system is, it's so easy to see through it. I mean, I've been spending my whole life since I was 16 years old, seeing right through this damn thing. And, it's laughable. It's laughable how pathetic we the people are. Pathetically inept in terms both of eradicating the banking system, resolving the issues, understanding that there's singular solutions. I mean, a regular reaction that I get is, isn't it arrogant to think you could mathematically perfect economy? I mean, for criminy sakes, all you have is a falsification of indebtedness and an imposition of interest, both of which you can trace the exact results of by the simplest arithmetic. And these manifest in three categoric faults. Of course, it's an innovation to categorize all faults. Otherwise, we would think there's infinite faults, but that in fact they fall into categories owing to the fact that there's only two basic aberrations which are introduced. One is the falsification of indebtedness, and imposition of interest, which results in terminal failure by perpetually multiplying a sum of falsified debt. And the other is a volumetric impropriety, which is the traditional inflation and deflation. Those are the only two powers of the obfuscation of the currency, or the anomalies or aberrations of the system, which of course are purposed. They like to keep a minimal circulation in circulation, so everybody needs to borrow. You see, all the more. So yes, it's extremely simple, in fact, to mathematically perfect economy, because if you have inflation and deflation and you have multiplication of falsified indebtedness, well, you don't multiply the indebtedness. How do you do that? You eradicate interest. Well, how can we do that if we, who would loan us money if it weren't subject to interest? And then you have to understand that you have this falsification of indebtedness. You're not borrowing money from banks. All they're doing is publishing evidence of your own damn promissory obligations, stupid. You're not borrowing money from banks, nor do you need to, unless you're denied your right to issue your promissory obligations free of exploitation, which we're restoring in this common monetary foundry. So the only things that you're really resolving is what multiplies debt, interest. We eradicate interest. Are we justified in that? Yes, we are. Is interest justified? No, it is not. And the other problem is inflation and deflation, which is an increase or decrease in circulation per represented value. How do you avoid increases or decreases in circulation per represented value? You maintain a circulation which always equals the volume of represented value. And how do you do that? One only way, and that is to pay the principal and retire the principal at the rate of consumption of the related property. Simple as that. Mathematically perfected economy. Oh, gee, there must be something else wrong. Well, yeah, systemic manipulation of the cost or value of money or property. But because all of that can only occur as a consequence of our first or third fault, or any combination thereof, we've already solved it. So there you are. Done.
Simple as that.
Mm-hmm.
Right, I've just come in. Jane has just come in with another question now. Based on what we've been talking about, she wants to know. I'm going to quote straight from what she said. She asks, "Am I a problem to society now because I'm not in debt anymore, not earning, so not contributing to the finances in any way?"
Well, no. In truth, sorry, Jane, you're just inconsequential. Just teasing, of course. No, that's not true. Of course, what we have actually is a case of a parasite. The banking system produces absolutely nothing.
Don't call Jane that. She won't like that.
No. I'm not calling Jane that. I'm saying the banking system. So the parasite thrives as long as the host isn't so jeopardized that it diminishes what the parasite can get from the host. So in truth, the ideal parasite is a thriving parasite who's willing to engage in borrowing to finance the very moment to the greatest degree possible, hoping and banking on the future, which is of course going to be denied them by this inherent multiplication of falsified indebtedness by interest. So that's the ideal situation. Jane isn't a problem to the system, though. Jane's state, like all the rest of us, is a consequence of the system. We are put out of work. We are working to a tiny fraction of our capabilities and willingness to incorporate unexhausted resources in further production and prosperity. And the reason is this obfuscation of the currency is multiplied a sum of indebtedness, which is dedicated practically the entire circulation to servicing debt. Even when you pay your electric bills and your water bills and your taxes, most of this is going to interest and falsified escalations of principal on government costs and on costs imposed upon all industry. It's all the banking system. the banking system and its corrupt partner, government, which would have eradicated banking itself if it weren't a corrupt partner. So we have them both dead to rights. We have government in breach of power, persisting in breach of power,